and this is our plan of attack.
Banks have become an essential threat to our democracy. So consider this justice.
Thank you for listening to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com, the #1 listener-supported radio station on the internet. Please help support this station so this battle can continue forward. Revolution Radio!
Extendivite really works. Just listen to what some people have to say.
Several years ago, I was developing a very severe situation. I called it my flippy heart. It was doing not good things, and I did not want to go to a medical doctor because I just knew they would give me a cover-up pill. I didn't want to get onto that sort of thing at all. When I learned it was garlic and cayenne is a healer. It is a wonderful herb. I said, I think I'm onto something here. I'll tell you, I wouldn't be without it. It did wonderful things for me.
Extendivite is only $69.95 for a 2-month supply of either capsules or liquid. Call now. That's 1-877-928-8822 or visit heartdrop.com.
Extend your life with Extendivite.
The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and freedomslips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Welcome to Sacred Matrix, a divine paradigm of love and universal consciousness, with your host, Janet Kira Lessin and Dr. Sasha Lessin.
Together, we transform the world.
And now, here are your hosts, Janet Kira and Dr. Sasha Lessin.
To the Sacred Matrix on Revolution Radio, Studio B. And I'm your host, Janet Kira Lessin, with my co-host, Dr. Sasha Alex Lessin. Our producer is Thomas Becker, and our guest today is Nancy Tertre, and she's going to pronounce it for you later. But before we get to that point, I'm just going to tell you a little bit about Nancy. She's known as the skeptical psychic. She's a trained psychic detective working with law enforcement and victims' families, a trained spiritual medium, a remote viewer. She's been trained in several different types of remote viewing, and they were originally established as part of the military psychic spy program, and she has developed her own type of remote viewing called TSP. She's a paranormal investigator working with teams around the country, a trained medical intuitive and energy healer, a ufologist specialized in alien languages, and is trained and certified in Intuitive Gestalt Psychotherapy for more than 20 years. She's also working with scientists on aspects of telekinesis, which involves moving matter with mind. She's operated several businesses, including a healthcare industry newspaper in New York, a 242-bed nursing home, and a French porcelain factory. As an attorney, she practiced securities litigation for nearly a decade in New York, and she has also sat on several local government boards and committees, founded a successful grassroots environmental group, and she also ran as a local political candidate. She's the former host of her own CBS radio show called Hot Leads, Cold Cases, and she's just a very talented lady. I've got a bio for her on aquarianradio.com, and you're going to want to check out Nancy. She's an amazing person. Dr. Sasha, Alex, listen, my beloved, are you there? Sound check. How are you?
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me? Yeah. Hi, Nancy. Yeah, we're really looking. Well, we don't usually deal with law enforcement affiliates like yourself. But that's amazing kind of stuff you've been doing, and I hope sometime during this session we get to hear what an alien language sounds like. And as far as psychokinesis, the one that I really dig is turn my water into wine. That's the potential of it. Okay.
Welcome, Nancy.
Thank you both very much.
Our listeners about? Thank you. What would you like to tell our listeners about you that I overlooked?
Oh my goodness! I think you gave me a very, very extensive opening bio there, so I appreciate that. I guess you and your listeners probably figured out by now that I have sort of a little bit of a split personality when it comes to, dealing with all things strange and weird, and then dealing with everything absolutely normal. So I enjoy sort of being able to walk on both sides of that fence.
Oh, yes, I forgot to mention it. You also have a book called How to Talk to an Alien. So we have to talk about that, too. But, yes, this is the weird network, and we're all the weird people, and I like the weird. So thank you for coming over here and playing with us. What's fun about being normal, right?
Well, wait a minute. You just can't drop that. I just am so intrigued. I would say you start out with saying I love you and I'm open-handed and wish you no harm. What's your take on how you talk to an alien?
Oh my goodness! I mean, that's a huge topic. I wrote a book about it, and it's a very long story. Depends on where you want to start.
Did you start in your life talking to aliens?
I'm having a little trouble hearing you guys because I don't know if am I coming in and out, but you guys are sort of coming in and out, so I'm missing about every other word.
When did you start talking to aliens?
Okay. Well, and the way that I explain this is that, and I believe Janet's already heard this, so forgive me if I'm repeating myself, but
this is a whole new network, so start over. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I don't know that I particularly talk to them. But my experience is that they have talked to me. And I didn't ask for it, wasn't looking for it. In fact, was not even interested in the entire topic of UFOs or extraterrestrials or any of that stuff. And it sort of, I had a fairly major experience. Actually, I've had several now with my daughter. So I think that there's a connection there. But she and I had gone to, this was June 19, 2011, we'd gone to a local movie theater, and we had seen Woody Allen's Midnight in Paris, which is all about going backwards in time. And it was kind of peculiar because even though I think it was a Monday or Tuesday night, there was nobody in that movie theater, and it was a multiplex. I have never seen nobody in a theater ever. And in fact, I don't even recall seeing any employees. Maybe there was one, but that's also very strange because normally there are lots of them running around there. So we got out at quarter to midnight. We walk out into the parking lot. It was located in a large mall in New Jersey, a place called Parsippany. We're about a half hour outside New York City. And this mall is located in between two major highways. And I was getting the keys out to get into the car, and we were the only car pretty much in the parking lot. My daughter says, she points up in the sky and she said, "What's that?" And up about, I would say, it was roughly a quarter, maybe a half a mile away. 500 to 1,000 feet in the air, and I'm really good with distance, and visual and direction and all that kind of stuff. And I looked up, and there was a mass of maybe 20 to 30 orange lights. And I thought that's very peculiar. I thought maybe there's, bouncing lights off the ground, beams of light, maybe with cloud cover, they were bouncing back. Who knows? I checked everything. There's nothing to explain that. Just a big mass of orange lights, which of course you never see. You see, blue, white, red, sometimes maybe, I don't know if I've ever seen green, but blue, white, and red for sure. And I lived in Manhattan for 25 years, so I used to watch all the planes coming in and out of LaGuardia and also JFK. So I know what they look like. And I've never seen orange lights in the sky. And pretty soon, as I stared at it, you could make out the shape. It was a boomerang shape. And when I say a boomerang shape, I don't mean a V shape. I mean a boomerang shape. So it's a little different from some of the more triangular shapes that people have seen. It had that, I don't even know how you describe it. They've got sort of a soft, rounded edge to them. And my daughter was terrified. She kept saying, let's go. And I said, no, I got to see what this does. And pretty soon, a very large white orb, about 15 to 20 feet in diameter, by my estimation, opened up on one of the wings. It was pure white luminescent light like I've never, ever, ever seen in the sky. It didn't twinkle. It didn't have any beams. It didn't look like a star or any type of a headlight, nothing like that. It was self-contained and luminescent, and it expanded open. And then it detached off of the craft, which was the size of a football field. It was massive. I've never seen anything like that, ever. And this orb started looping around in sort of a curlicue type of fashion, like it was looking for something. It went over to the opposite side of this craft. It went behind it, disappeared briefly, came back over the top, and then redocked, and then telescoped closed and disappeared. And again, my daughter was saying, let's get in the car, go. And I said, nope. And we watched until this craft either cloaked or dematerialized in 3 phases. The tips of the wings went, and then the rest of the wings, and then the central part of this sort of boomerang shape. And then as we drove home, we decided not to talk about it. We both drew pictures of it before we discussed anything. They were identical, so we knew we'd seen the same thing. And for the next year and a half, she and I both got telephone call interruptions from a very, very strange electronic male-sounding voice that sounded like it was coming through a huge sort of sea of electronic distortion. Although it didn't sound like a distorted human voice, it was speaking a language neither one of us could understand. We could both hear it, but it would prevent us from hearing each other anymore in the phone call. And then it would talk and what appeared to be something like sentences. And then it would finish. And one time it did say her name. And then it would hang up both of us. And then we would be unable to call each other back for about 10 minutes usually. And that went on for a year and a half. And eventually it started happening with some of her friends and her, and then me and some of my friends and clients. So other people heard whatever this voice was. And then it just stopped until it stopped for several years. And until recently, it was a couple of years ago, I got woken up telepathically hearing the same voice, which I would recognize anywhere. It's very, very specific. And I called my daughter the next day, and she said, well, that's really weird. The same voice. She said, same thing. I hadn't heard it for years, but it just, when I was trying to call a friend of mine, it broke into my phone call again. So that got me, that's a very long story on how I got interested in alien languages, because I'm fluent in French, I speak some German, I speak some Thai, obviously I speak English. And so I like language. And I also studied Old English and Old French. When you're in law school, you learn some Latin. I can understand a little bit of Dutch and Yiddish because of the German. I can understand a lot of other Romance languages, even though I don't speak them. So I like language, and I'm a pretty good mimic, so I like accents. because they give you a lot of information. What I discovered is through studying cases on alien language, and all, I have many friends who are contactees and or abductees, whatever you want to call them. And so I got a lot of what I thought was really interesting data about how aliens communicate. And of course, and I'm saying aliens, by the way, I hope that's not offensive to anybody, but that's just what I say. An alien to me, my husband is, he's an alien, he's a Frenchman. But he became also American. So I guess he's no longer technically alien. But, alien just means a stranger and somebody who is unusual or strange to us and our customs. That's all. Anyway, so I call them aliens. But what I discovered was that, yes, they communicate telepathically, obviously, and that's what everybody always says, and yes, that's true. However, they also, and I don't say all of them because I think there are many different species, and they're different number counts, depending on what authority you're looking at. But many of them speak some human languages. Some of them speak hundreds of them. And I believe there are about, if I remember rightly, I think there are about 7,000 human languages. A lot of them are dying, though. That includes a lot of the smaller languages. And some of them speak with accents, which gives you an indication maybe of how they've trained, who they've trained with, how long they've been learning a language. And that's pretty interesting. And some of them, the ones who are communicating telepathically, they actually can make mistakes in telepathic communication. And I, in my book, How to Talk to an Alien, I've got some documented cases of that. So I hope I didn't talk your ear off with that one.
Yeah. No. That's
well,
what do you mean by mistake?
Did you find out what the guy was saying? Did you find out what that guy was saying, or any part of what that? And did you record what was coming over your telephones?
No, because I was continuously not expecting it. And if you start out as sort of a non-believer in something, you just don't pay attention. You kind of say, "No, that was weird," or "That was a one-time thing," and that'll never happen again. And then it does, and then it does. And no, it didn't occur to me. It just never occurred to me. But I will tell you, there is a phenomenon, I'm sure you're familiar with it, where I believe it's a form of mind control. When there is some form of contact or sighting, very often, I have a good friend of mine who she always takes a camera with her everywhere she goes. She puts it in her car. It's right up in the front seat, and when she's driving. So in the event that she sees an interesting UFO or something, she's got the camera right there. She's ready to go. She did a trip, and I wrote about this. She did a trip, I think from, if I remember, I think it was from California to Arizona. And on that trip, she's looking up in the sky. She sees a UFO. Then she sees a couple of them. Anyway, it goes on and on. Finally, she said she saw probably about 100 of them. And this is a person who gets really excited by this stuff. And she didn't. She got to her destination. Her friend said, "So anything unusual?" Well, yeah. Well, what happened? Well, I saw about maybe 100 UFOs in the sky. And her friend went crazy. Said, "Well, did you get pictures?" And my friend said, "Nah." And I think that,
and I think that is mind control.
It is, and that's one of the ways that I induce hypnosis when I'm working with a partner is we tell totally different inductions in each ear, and it puts a person immediately into a deep trance, and so that you and your daughter could have been tranced by what was happening.
That's entirely possible. I don't discount that somebody can, create screen memories or erase memories or get you so confused that you're in a different state or whatever. The only thing I can tell you about me, from what I know about me, is that, and I think I discussed this with you, Janet. I am not hypnotizable, and I'm going to be, and I know a lot of people who do hypnosis. I'm friends with the, do you know the Amazing Kreskin?
Don't know.
I've heard of him, but I don't know him.
Well, he's sort of, he's been around for a long time. Johnny Carson, on the Johnny Carson show, based his, what did he call him? The Magnificent Karnak, I think. He was sort of the mentalist magician. He used to wear a turban. Anyway, he had the Amazing Kreskin on his show more than any other guest. I think it was more than 60 times. Amazing Kreskin is an extremely, he's very well known, very, very adept mentalist and hypnotist. And he told me he's got the largest private library of books on hypnosis in the world. He had more than, I think, 9,000 volumes.
Whoa.
So he kind of knows his stuff. And I think I said to him at the time, I said, I learned how to hypnotize people. I have a strange story about that. But when I was 8, so I would go around and hypnotize all my little friends. And then I'd say, okay, here's how you do it. Now you hypnotize me. And nobody could ever hypnotize me. And it bugged me. But, I know my daughter is unbelievably hypnotizable. I'm just not. I'm also I remember almost all my dreams. I'm a lucid dreamer. I have a I'm a light sleeper. When I do my psychic or mediumship work, I will put myself into a very sort of light trance state. And if you want to call that a form of self-hypnosis, I understand that. But I've never been in a state where I have not been in control of the data that I'm delivering, always.
Yeah, you know what? Most people won't admit it, but they really are too.
Well, then I've got the wrong concept of what hypnosis is.
It means suggestion. You understood that that you suggested stuff to yourself. That's all it means.
Well, I think when you're an artist, I think that you are extremely good at suggesting things to yourself. When you're a creative person, because creativity comes from a place of convincing yourself about a different reality possibility. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But, when people, when I see, sessions of people having been hypnotized and discovering information, or they're oblivious to that, they had no idea, and they come up with this phenomenal new stuff about, like an abduction experience or something. I can't do that. I've tried. I just can't. It just won't happen.
But you have the gift of remembering anyhow. Way more than most people.
Well, and that maybe that's a gift or a curse. I don't know.
Wow,
what do you
that's
think?
Wonderful. I think it's wonderful.
I don't know. I mean, I'm a big believer that you should, excuse me, if you're confronted with something really terrible, let's say, I'm a big believer. I would prefer to know about it than not. So I make a point to always investigate stuff, even though if I'm terrified of it. Which, by the way, was probably the reason why I decided to stand there and figure out what this giant UFO was going to do with itself. Because I just want to know, and I'd rather know than not know.
So one hypothesis in existential psychology is that what you fear at some level is what a part of you wants, whatever that is. Is that a valid hypothesis from your perspective?
I think that's what I always read about people who are afraid of heights actually have a hidden desire to jump.
Yeah.
So in that sense,
got it.
Yeah, maybe.
And so if a person is terrified of alien contact, that means that whatever that means to them, whatever need that serves, is intrinsic to them, and that it goes two ways, that somehow you are serving yourself and a part of you by alien contact, that it's useful to you, to your ecology in some way.
Well, yeah, because my ecology, or whatever that is, me and my environment all together.
Yeah.
We all want to know everything, because we believe, number one, that we can, and that it is doable. And I want to do it while I'm enjoying life, and I love living.
Right on. Oh, thank you. That's wonderful. Thank you so much.
We like people who love living.
Yeah.
It's too many people that are depressed and don't want to live anymore. It's like, no, love living.
If you look around long enough, or not even long enough, you can look anywhere and find unbelievable beauty and excitement and joy, and then have gratitude and just, I don't know. And there's so much more to learn and that's there for us. You know, all you got to do is open yourself up to it.
Right on. Yeah. So you went through your story. Any more to do with that story? What happened after that? What was next? I saw the ship.
This voice, now, if I can do an imitation of it, I don't know if I'll be able to. It's like that.
Uh-huh.
Wow, you could change the speed of that. Did you you could, if you did that faster, I wonder what you would get.
I have no idea. But, and I know that there are lots of people who I know who say, yes, they speak light languages, they're speaking very specifically, languages from particular galaxies or stars or planets or whatever. I always wonder, well, because, and this is the basic skeptic in me, I guess, or the person that just needs like some corroborating evidence of something, so that it's not just pure imagination. I mean, I'd like to know how do they know it's from that location? And how do they know that they're actually communicating with another being via that language versus simply making sounds at them? Where's the evidence on that? That's all I'm looking for. So I look for, and by the way, that's comes out of my it comes out of my theory about how we develop a certain degree of consciousness and psychic ability. And I wrote about this. I have another book called Psychic Intuition, Everything You Wanted to Ask But Were Afraid to Know. And what I explain is that, when we're first born, we have to go through this process of corroborating evidence of our senses. So if a baby is looking up at the little mobile I don't know how to pronounce it, mobile that you have over the crib, with little things that turn and the baby's looking at it, and the baby eventually their eyes get better. They could start to see stuff moving, and then you see them trying to grab it. What they're trying to do is it's a cross-modal sensory experience where they're trying to confirm by touch what they're seeing with their eyes, their visual sense. And we do that all the time unconsciously with all five senses. So that we can say, okay, we got, this is reality now. We got a fact, as opposed to what is that? Or am I having a fantasy experience, a dream experience, a visionary experience? I mean, they're all different levels of experience.
When we used to, I worked with Stan Groff for many years, and when people were either doing holotropic breath work or entheogenic work, they would often speak glossaria and think they're in a conversation with someone. But if you just there is something that's being transmitted in terms of the whole interaction that they can learn. It may be the structure of the interaction rather than the content of it that really gives you a bigger picture. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, sure. There are, and by the way, once you start dealing with body language, which is going to be primarily, visual, or you've got tonalities, which is going to be auditory, or you've got a touch sensation with somebody. All of those modalities are going to speak, or it's going to communicate a ton of information to you. You don't need particularly words for that. So I mean, I get that. And, if it's like, you ever see those, I think his name was, Larson, who used to do these great cartoons with animals.
Oh yeah.
Show up on mugs and things. And then, it'd be like the cat or the dog sitting there with their food bowl and the human standing over there saying blah, 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 food, blah, 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 blah.
Great.
So, yeah, could be the tonality. I mean, I speak a whole different way I have two cats. I speak very differently to them, but they know exactly what I'm talking about.
Oh yeah, they do. They're very smart.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you're dealing with other languages when you're talking to a cat. And you learn to understand what they're saying too.
Oh, totally.
Sometimes they're saying wet food, sometimes they're saying dry food, sometimes they're saying giving my kitty treats. And if you give them the wrong thing, they stick their noses up and they glare at you. Like, oh, I did the wrong thing. Excuse me. You wanted wet food. I'm like, dared to give you dry. Oh my goodness.
If I tell my cats dry food, they look at me like I am an idiot. Like, really? You think I'm going to eat dry food?
What? Some kind of idiot? Yep, get the same thing. So, and then they have different tones. My one cat, Athena, she goes,
Mm-hmm.
And my Siamese goes, They all different tones. And that's just an animal that we're all, imagine the extraterrestrials.
Yes, exactly. And one of the things. Go ahead.
I keep getting the sense from the people that I interview that it's not just that they're passively getting downloads, but when you're making contact with other is also making a coherent field with you. And so it goes two ways. And that's why although you may think we puny and insignificant in the cosmos, I think we're a fractal of everything anyhow, and we can influence. And that's why other seems to really be a part of self.
I'm certainly not going to disagree with you. I mean, I think that we're all some type of, holographic incorporation. And so I wouldn't argue with anything you just said.
Okay, so doing that means that is probably how you can remote view and find out where the body is or who done it and stuff like that. In a way, you project or astrally send yourself into that energy. Could you tell us about some of the cases? That fascinates me. You've helped the police find stuff out.
Yeah, in terms of the technique, I think there are all kinds of different techniques that can sort of get you to a place of information, and people use lots of different techniques. Sometimes I find that if I am, first of all, if I have too much information, it's sometimes more difficult than if I have less, and that's a fairly common thing. And if I have too much information, sometimes I will try to force my intention to get me an answer. And forcing doesn't work really well. It's kind of like when I was in school, when I would have to write a paper about something, the more that I would torture myself over writing this paper and saying all the right words and trying to research it 100% and get everything right, the worse it usually was. If I zipped it off really fast, didn't think about it, and thought, oh, what a piece of junk that was, invariably I would get praised, unbelievably for whatever it was, which I thought was incredibly unfair of the universe, that your best work could be the easiest. That just didn't seem right to me. But I think when you're remote viewing something, if you try to force your intention to send you there, a lot of times what you get back is what you expect. And the whole idea is you don't want to get anything that you expect. So if you do something like setting your intention early on, so you know what your session is about, and then you just drop it. You forget about it. Let it go. Surrender it, and give yourself up to anything. And anything means you have to be okay with getting really weird stuff. And that's how I think usually my best information comes. And you wanted to know about cases. I mean, and I don't claim to have solved any cases. I don't think it's what a psychic is about, since normally they're not doing the legwork. It's law enforcement or the police, whoever. They're the people out there doing the actual investigation. And so the way that I view what a psychic detective does is they generally get brought into a case at a point where the police are at a standstill. It might already have turned into a cold case, or they just don't know what to do at that point. They've given up. They've used every logical means that they can. And by the way, a good part of the police are incredibly intuitive, so they're operating using a lot of intuition as well. And so they pull you in at a certain point, and so your job is to provide sort of the missing pieces of evidence that are going to get them back on the track. So what I've done before is to describe. I'm getting some feedback on this line.
Yeah, I don't know why. I periodically get that. We'll just power through.
Okay.
Ignore that, people. It goes away.
Yeah, hopefully I don't, because I can't stand listening to myself.
Oh my God, I have to hear myself.
Yeah,
okay,
no, that's.
It seems fine now.
It may involve.
No, this is really hot because I had a friend that was in the FBI. They had a special group of psychic FBI guys that they were the ones that got the bomber that you put all the nail bombs and mailed them to everybody.
You're talking about the Unabomber?
The Unabomber, yeah. The FBI had their own group of FBI guys that were into it, and they got clues, and they ultimately this fellow John was saying got that guy by the clues that the psychics like you were getting.
Yeah. So you can get clues. I mean, I've basically come up with information about location of bodies, which has been generally, confirmed by the investigations that have been done, or information about descriptions of suspects, which, in one particular case that I'm thinking of had absolutely, I described this suspect apparently quite well, and then at a certain point you get driven around by law enforcement, and you check out the actual, the realities, and then you see if you can sort of pull in more information about them. I've gotten information about names of witnesses. obviously a lot of times you're looking for the weapons that have been used, and a lot of times they're difficult. They're difficult to confirm to get access to because they get destroyed or hidden or whatever. I'm trying to think what else.
Fascinating.
Missing people. Some of the creepiest cases that I've worked on have been usually they've involved pedophiles and pedophile murderers and rapists and that kind of stuff. And those are just incredibly creepy. And all you want to do is and there's one particular case that it just always bugged me. Was that I ended up tuning in not to the victim. Not that would be any great thing to tune into, but in these cases, I think that's optimal. You want to start seeing pretty much what the victim was seeing. But in this case, I tuned into the suspect, and it was just, he was just absolutely, it happened a couple times, just disgusting. And when something that disgusting gets into your psyche, into your interior, you just go, ugh. You just want to take a complete psychic bath at that point, and a good scrubbing,
Wow.
So do you ever quit? Do you ever say, I'm not doing this anymore, it's too creepy?
No, because that's not my nature. I just don't give up with stuff. I'm sort of a bulldog with whatever I start.
I knew you were going to say that.
Yeah, well, yeah. No, I keep going. And by the way, I've experienced enough, weird and creepy and frightening things, that I don't get frightened too easily.
Did they ever show you the bodies?
Yeah. Yeah. And that sort of
things.
If you're talking about the actual physical bodies, no, I don't see the actual physical bodies. I see photographs sometimes of the actual physical bodies. And those are the kind, it sort of stays, once it's shown to you, you can't really undo the seeing.
Right.
So you have to be okay with that. And I know that there are just a lot of psychics who they just don't want to do that. It's just sort of too overwhelming for and psychics tend to be very, very delicate, highly sensitized people. So that's, unless you're kind of toughened to that or how to deal with it. And being a lawyer, by the way, you learn how to get tough pretty fast.
Right, that's not an easy profession.
No, because it's essentially warfare. It's just done with different tools. And so you get used to being attacked by the enemy. So you learn how to toughen up.
Yeah, I could never be a lawyer.
Well, never
words are better than guns. Laws are better than arbitrary force.
Well, the pen is mightier than the sword, so...
Right.
Words can be...
It might be fun to figure out the logic, but I couldn't be the litigation attorney. I guess that's what I want to say. That would just be... I can't stand to do that. Some people like to do that, though.
In order to...
argue it. Yeah.
What I discovered was that being a litigator, you have to actually enjoy drawing blood from your opponent. You have to enjoy it, because that will give you the energy and the drive to keep going.
Right.
Oh.
Uh-oh.
We drew blood. Anyway, so, okay. Go ahead, Sasha. You have a question?
Oh, no, I don't have a question. My father was a lawyer. He was known as the reconciling lawyer, and people would come to him, and he'd get them to have give their marriage and relationship a second chance. and about a third of them took, and the other 2/3 came back and paid him twice.
Right. Well, that's good.
That was smart of your dad. He got paid twice.
So, in other words, a lawyer can be a mediator and an arbitrator, and there's room for loving souls in law too, I think.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, you can do transactional law, which is fairly level-headed and kind. Not always kind, but you try and grab, but eventually you'll come up with something reasonable. Unless you're getting trampled, or you can be a mediator or an arbitrator. But even there, I mean, there are all kinds of games to be played. The man who walked me down the aisle the first time around was a very well-known arbitrator and mediator in New York City, and he eventually became dean of a law school.
Wow.
But yeah, I mean, there's different levels, let me put it that way.
So you've had all these little mini lives within this overlife. You have all these different things you've done.
Wait, I couldn't hear you. You blanked out there for a second.
You've had a bunch of little mini lives within this long life that you have, like little subsections. You did this type of work and then that type of work. What type of work are you doing right now? What's your main focus?
My main focus right now is, I would say, it's two things. I'm working on this type of remote viewing that I've developed over the last 10 years or so, and I call it TSP. And I'm actually right now setting up for my next course, which I'm hoping to set up in the fall. And so I'm doing that. I really enjoy that. I really, really enjoy teaching people.
What does TSP stand for?
What does it stand for?
I find that hilarious. Everybody wants to know what does it stand for, and I never feel really compelled to explain it. It's it's a very let me say this. It's a very, very poorly put together acronym for tested ESP. TESP.
Yes. Okay.
Or the skeptical psychic.
And how is it different from other systems?
It's very different. I got one of my mentors in life was Ingo Swann, who created remote viewing along with the physicists Hal Puthoff and Russell Targ at the Stanford Research Institute back in 1972-73. And they did that for the CIA, and then it got bumped around to various, military and intelligence organizations that ended up funding it. You had the Stargate program and all of that. And my trainer in control remote viewing was Lynn Buchanan, who was in the Stargate program. And I'm also trained in associative remote viewing with Marty Rosenblatt's group, the Applied Precognition Project, APP. And I've also been trained in extended remote viewing. So I know remote viewing pretty well, and I know why it was put together. I know most of those guys, from that program. And I know the advantages. I know the disadvantages to it. It had an aspect, particularly, and I'm talking now mostly about controlled remote viewing. That's sort of the classic type.
Yeah.
It's sort of, if you have any ability psychically, it sort of puts you in this hideous straitjacket. And you spend your time saying, oh my God, it's so tight, and you're squirming and saying, well, how am I going to get out of this? And why do I have to do that? And, and I know, when you're starting out doing your ideograms and your gestalts and your little sketches and your descriptors and all that kind of very, very formalized protocol stuff that you have to do. because there's absolutely a format to it. I know why it's done, and I get it. And I think that works for people who maybe doubt themselves or their own abilities, because it kind of leads you. It's sort of like the Socratic method. You know, Socrates would ask his whoever it was who he was arguing with. He'd ask them questions which they didn't know where he was going with the questions. They'd agree, and eventually they'd agree to everything he said. So by the time he got to his final point, they had no choice but to agree with him. And I think remote viewing is a little bit like that too. You know, it brings you down this pathway of, well, I don't know how to do this, and I can't do that, and that's impossible, and this is just a stupid little exercise. I'm not even focused on and lo and behold, there you finally come up with some accurate data once you get your feedback. But I don't need that. And for me, it slows me down. And I think it slows down a lot of people who I know, and I think there are faster ways to do it. And I think some of the issues that get raised by a lot of remote viewers, that, you know, it's that issue I was talking about before, which is you don't want to know too much about whatever your target is, because sometimes that can interfere, because now your logical thinking brain is starting to try and guess an answer or to think an answer.
Right.
And that'll prevent your psychic ability, which is used a very, very different way. So I think that and in remote viewing, by the way, they call that analytic overlay. They will literally, you're supposed to write it in a different column because it's considered garbage. And people have a real problem with it. You know, well, what's analytic overlay? How do I know if I'm guessing or thinking? And why isn't that good? And maybe it was good. You know, so there are all kinds of issues with that anyway. TSP that I'm teaching people incorporates a lot of skills that I have learned through all different types of my psychic and mediumship training. And I think there are ways that you can teach people how to overcome that problem of analytic overlay or thinking too much when you're trying to be psychic. And I think you can give people more freedom. And so far, I can tell you the courses that I have taught, and I've taught students all over the world, they have loved it. And I mean really loved it. They have come back for more. And I've been told that what I'm teaching them has been life-changing to them. It's been helpful, not just in ways, you know, that they could figure out how to remote view something, but it's given them something fundamentally really important to their own sense of being, of consciousness, of self-awareness, judgment, and kindness to themselves. I don't know how to explain it more than that. It's sort of a complex system. I do have a lot of protocols, but they don't put you in a straitjacket the same way. And one thing, by the way, that I incorporate is into the TSP system are synchronicities, and I have been astounded. Whoops, I'm hearing major feedback now.
We're hearing this again. Yeah, not sure what makes that happen, but. We're going to be taking a break in 2 minutes here. Yeah, 3 minutes here.
Yeah, so just real quickly, this you know what synchronicities are. I mean, people, your listeners, for anyone who doesn't know what synchronicity is, it's basically considered, Carl Jung coined the term, it's a meaningful coincidence. So when you have two events that are clearly not causally related and all of a sudden they both happen at the same time, you say, whoa, that was just weird, bizarre that those things happened. That's a synchronicity. I incorporate those into my TSP system. And what I just spoke at the conference for the Society for Scientific Exploration. And, I gave them a sampling of my last 70 cases, and 26% of them involved synchronicities, and some of them were absolutely amazing synchronicities. Like, you know, you would say, well, that's impossible. So there's something going on, and I don't know why people haven't done this in remote viewing before. They should have, because I think that there's a linkage in terms of consciousness and how, you know, it's what you were saying before, Sasha, about, the link between the inside and the outside, our sort of conscious environment, we can do a lot of things that are co-creating. And I think synchronicities are operating on that level.
Yeah, it's obvious that when you have a gestalt emerging from your being, you attend to stimuli in the environment that to withdraw from or move toward, to put it in some of my terms. And in my terms, when you center yourself, you have both your believer and your disbeliever. That is, your intellect is not gone; it's just at the service of your larger exploration, and so you can be both spiritual and practical at the same time, and have a sense from your neutral witness, just how that affects you, those things that affect you. And, it seems pretty, what you're saying in your terminology is coterminous, ultimately with, Jungian psychology.
Yeah, I think so too.
Well, we're coming up with a break right now. So we'll be back in about 5 minutes, and hopefully we can clear up this echo. And let's talk about synchronicities when we get back. See you in 5.
Radio at freedomslips.com. We'll be right back after this message.
Syndicalist commune. We take it in turns to act as a sort of executive officer for the week. Yes. But all the decisions of that officer have to be ratified at a special bi-weekly meeting. Yes, I see. By a simple majority in the case of purely internal affairs. Be quiet. But by a 2/3 majority in the case of more... Be quiet. I order you to be quiet. Look, you stupid bastard, you've got no arms left. Yes, I have. Look! It's just a flesh wound.
I don't believe I've seen such a display of courage, skill, nerve, grace, and stupidity.
I'll do you for that. Oh, what? Come here. What are you going to do, bleed on me? I'm invincible. You're a loony. The Black Knight always triumphs.
Roundtable Live, Monday through Friday, 1 a.m. till 4 a.m. Eastern Time. Bring your mind, bring your ideas, bring your voice. King Arthur had nothing on us here at Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com.
Enjoy your extra big-ass fries.
You didn't give me no fries. I got an empty box.
Would you like another? Extra big-ass fries.
I said I didn't get any.
Thank you. Your account has been charged. Your balance is 0. Please come back when you can afford to make a purchase.
No.
I'm sorry you're having
trouble.
Come on.
My kids are starving.
Thank you for tuning in to Revolution Radio. Here at Revolution Radio, we believe in freedom of ideas, freedom of speech, but above all, we believe in freedom of existence through self-reliance. This station is 100% listener supported, and as a fundraising promotion, I have a kick-ass free gift for a $100 donation. 35,000 seeds. 25 years in the freezer. Long-term storable, 54 different varieties. So if food prices go crazy, the shit hits the fan, or if you just want to save tons of money every year by creating your own food like I do, grab our seed pack special. Just look for the banner on the homepage at freedomslips.com. Don't be a statistic. Don't be part of the problem. Be part of the solution. We need, as humans, to start taking care of ourselves and not depending on the megacorps. to provide unhealthy, nasty food. Included in this package is also a DVD with 900 survival and off-grid living documents and the offline home canning, how to do everything website, all on the DVD. So when you're growing all that food, you know how to can it, store it, preserve it, etc. with all these documents. So thank you for tuning in to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. I hope that you will pick up this package and start learning to be free. Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, where information never sleeps and freedom is one seed that needs to be planted.
What we do in life echoes in eternity.
Thanks for tuning in to Revolution Radio. Here at Revolution Radio, we are listener-sponsored and commercial-free. But there still are bills to pay. In order to raise some needed funds to cover the cost, our station is offering a silver special. In the continental United States for a $60 donation, or in Alaska, Hawaii, or Canada for a $70 donation, we will send you an uncirculated 2018 1-ounce pure silver eagle. The $70 donation, the extra 10 is to cover shipping, by the way, outside of the continental United States. When making the donation, you must put Silver Eagle promo in the notes on the donation. And thank you for tuning in to Revolution Radio at revolution.radio and freedomslips.com. Without you, there is no us. Revolution Radio, where information never sleeps.
It happens more often than we can imagine. In my case, I was sitting at home, and out of nowhere, I just started feeling uncomfortable. Then it got worse, and I started perspiring. I tried to ignore it, but I waited too long. The chest pain came as we were driving to the hospital emergency. I felt my life clock begin to tick. I barely survived. There was lots of damage done to my heart. What do I do now? I was lucky. I took a leap of faith and tried a 7-herb formula with hawthorn, garlic, cayenne, and more called Extendivite. Herbs have been used for thousands of years to keep us healthy. If you're not using Extendivite as a preventative supplement, maybe it's time to start. To order, call 1-877-928-8822 or visit heartdrop.com.
Extend your life with Extendivite.
The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and freedomslips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Aloha and welcome back to the Sacred Matrix on Revolution Radio. I'm your host, Janet Carol Lessin, with Dr. Sasha Alex Lessin, producer Thomas Becker, also known as a Mad Painter, and our guest is Nancy Tertre. And before we get back to our show, I'd like to remind everybody to please go over to that donation button on Revolution Radio and make your donation this week, because we really, really need your donation. And a Mad Painter, are there any specials right now? I know you can't get into the back end for the amount, but any specials?
No, ma'am. Just that we would sure appreciate your donation, because we have no clue right now how much money we got, because we can't get in there right at the moment with Hawk being sick.
Yes, so please send prayers or meditation or whatever you do, whatever you believe, to Hawk, because he is sick right now. Okay. Dr. Sasha, are you back?
Yes, indeed. Indeed, I'm back. And what I ask in the second half of the show of people that have had extraterrestrial contact is what is the essence of the wisdom that they've accumulated from the specific guides or the general contacts that they've had from the extraterrestrials to people of Earth.
So before we went on break, we were talking about synchronicities, and Nancy, I'd like you to tell us some of those examples of the extreme synchronicities. I think Peter Moon said in his book, when you have synchronicities to the extent that it's beyond random probability, you know you're into something. I think it was like something in the realm of magic, it's beyond science and religion. It goes into some kind of magic. Could you tell us a little bit more about your synchronicities? And also I wanted to know, have you been abducted or contacted in a way where you've on board ship or you saw any extraterrestrials? If not you, maybe your daughter or something. So those are my two questions for the second hour.
Okay, what, you want them in that order? Because I give you an...
Go ahead.
Whatever
you want to do.
I had and by the way, I am familiar with, implants and whatever, and I had gotten to know Dr. Lear, who was the only surgeon around who was at least admitting to removing alien implants and that kind of thing. And unfortunately, he's passed away since. And I have lots and lots of friends who claim to have implants, and I've seen lots and lots of x-rays and that kind of thing. And, people have asked me and I've said, no, definitely not. What I have had, which I find peculiar, and I have blogged about this on the Skeptical Psychic blog, is little equilateral triangles of like three equally placed points or dots that will show up out of nowhere. They don't appear to be any type of insect bite that you could identify, or moles or freckles or anything like that. They're just kind of weird. And I've had several of those. And once I blogged about it, I discovered that there are actually a whole lot of people out there who have had what I'm talking about, and have had various doubts in their own minds, or questions, I should say, about whether it might be related to some type of extraterrestrial contact. That I've had. Implants, no, but I will say that I went to the dentist. I had an emergency dental thing this week. So I go to my regular dentist on Thursday. He says, no, I got to send you the root canal guy. First thing in the morning, I show up with the root canal guy. He takes a look they do a special x-ray. It's a panoramic thing, at my molar. It's an upper molar. And, he said, no, I'm really sorry. You got to go right now. Like, I'm setting up the appointment right now with the oral surgeon. You got to get this thing removed. What he had seen, what he finally told me, and then the oral surgeon also told me, was not only was there, I'd had a root canal in that molar, and there was a giant abscess, which they said was chronic, but I thought that was odd because I think they did this particular root canal at least 30, 35 years ago. But apparently they didn't do a very good job, because my root canal guy said, no, there's no way I can get back. I cannot do another root canal to repair it, because they seem to have left some metal in there. And he said, it could be like part of the drill bit that they used or something like that. And this was the weird part, he said, if you go, the roots or the nerve roots of your teeth are really close to the barrier of your sinuses, your sinus cavity. And anybody who is a dentist, a root canal person or whatever, they never, ever, ever cross that sinus barrier, because you could screw up a lot of things, I guess, but they just don't do it because, and all my dentists said there is some strange object in the sinus cavity there. They have no clue what it was. They did not remove it. They removed whatever stupid thing they had done with the drill bit. But so apparently I got something. whether it was, the result of a really bad dentist or an extraterrestrial, I don't know at this point. But it is what it is. So that's the answer on the first question. The second question.
So you just don't know.
I don't know.
But I've had a similar thing. I had my doctor who x-rayed my brain was a woman, and she came and said, "Look at this, you have a missing sinus cavity." And I go, "Yeah, what's that mean?" Because only like 0.5% of 1% in the whole planet has this thing going on that you do. Then when she's talking, I go, "Yeah, ET's at bed here." And she's trying to wrap her mind around it to get a logical explanation. And I wasn't going to tell her. Nope, not home for that one.
Uh-huh.
But they wouldn't know what to do if they did know. I mean, did we tell her? No, they're not trained in that. So, but you can have those types of indicators. But you didn't have anything. I mean, that's great. You have a mystery there, and it's wonderful. But you didn't have anything because you guys were like contacted, or you had a major sighting. Typically, we don't want to put everybody in a box and label people, but typically there's something, more when someone has that type of a major sighting, even if it's military. It seems like they're showing themselves to you. They have some interest in you.
Well,
and then you've had all that communication, and you don't know. Okay. Well,
need to
witness.
What I realized after that sighting was I'd actually seen, I'd had many other sightings before that, and also after that. They just weren't quite as dramatic as that. So yeah, there have been, and normally if I go out, I can, if I look, long enough in the sky, there will be some type of I would say a craft that will show up. It just is. So yeah, there's certainly, I will absolutely admit to long-term interaction because now I understand what it is. I get it. I will also admit to long-term, interaction involving my daughter and me. And I don't think I told you this story, but I had an interesting experience when she was going to college, and I was driving her and her brother, who's 6 years younger. He was much younger. I was driving them out to Pittsburgh. She wants to look at a college out there. And as we're driving through the foothills of Pittsburgh, it gets sort of windy and dark and not too much traffic. And I was really bored, and the kids are sleeping. And I said, if there are any UFOs out there, now's the perfect time. Go ahead, feel free to show up. And they didn't. And we got to our hotel. I put the two kids in one bed, and I put me in the other. I was totally exhausted after driving for, 7-8 hours. They watched Benjamin Buttons, The Curious Case of Benjamin Buttons, which, by the way, another movie about time going backwards. And in the middle of the night, my daughter, who is, she's always been sort of a tossing and turning type of sleeper, and sort of, she says single words like, yeah, no, yeah, okay, yeah, sort of like that, but nothing. She's never said anything. Anyway, she all of a sudden sits bolt upright in her bed, her eyes flip open, and she says, forget about the grace. I don't know what you humans mean by grace anyway. And then her eyes close and she falls back on her pillow, sound asleep. And my heart was beating so fast. I jumped out of bed. I wrote down the exact words because I knew it was intended for my ears. And I was a little bit freaked out because I had spent the previous day speaking with a secular exorcist, trying to figure out, because I had interviewed the top exorcist for the Vatican, and he talked about working with some psychics that he called charismatics. So I wanted to know what's a charismatic. There's somebody who works with charisms. Okay, what's a charism? So I had spoken with this exorcist, and he sent me all this Vatican literature that I've been looking over, the day before our trip. And it turned out that a charism is defined, they are things like, healing with your hands, making prophecies, speaking in tongues, things like that. And they are known colloquially as a grace. Yeah. So what my daughter had said to me, in her, whatever was happening there, she said, I mean, forget about the grace. I don't know what you humans mean by grace anyway. And that kind of flipped me out, because then I thought, are we dealing with something really negative that is using my teenage daughter, who I didn't share any of this information with? None of it. Never discussed it with my kids. But then somebody said, no. So the next morning I said to her, Celine, what does the word grace mean to you? She said, you mean like what you say at Thanksgiving? And I said, yeah. Anything else? She said, you mean like a ballet dancer? They have grace? I said, yeah. Anything else? No, that's about it. And then I had this like stroke of, it was like a flash of insight. And I said, Celine, did you have any strange dreams last night? And she thought about it and she said, oh yeah, I dreamt that these aliens came on a spacecraft and they picked me up and they took me into another galaxy. And I was having such a good time there. And they said, but now you got to go back. And she said, but I didn't want to go back. They said, you have to. And I said, oh, really? And do you remember what their craft looked like? She described it. And I said, well, now that's interesting, because once I got back to sleep after she had woken me up, I had a dream about watching a craft exactly the same type that she described, but I watched it fly away. So that leaves you with a whole bunch of questions. And by the way, somebody much later said to me, did you ever consider that maybe you misheard her? Maybe she said graze instead of grace.
Yeah, grace. Yeah.
I mean, forget about the grays. I don't know what you humans mean by grays anyway. I mean, that's a whole other way to look at this.
Mm-hmm.
So
I thought you were saying grace, and you're saying grace, so
yeah,
what I thought
you
were saying.
But so then you've got to ask, I think there are an awful lot of overlaps here, with the paranormal world. And I don't claim to understand the overlaps entirely. I understand some things about them. But I think that in this case, there was the overlap was so blatant, that there has to be something to that.
Right.
But maybe it's like, I have seen craft that have shapeshifted. They've gone from oval shapes into square shapes and stuff like that. So all of this shape shifting, let's call it, can be probably very much linked into, how our thoughts shape shift.
Well, you're very psychic. That's why you're doing the remote viewing, and you had some connection with the military. You weren't in the military, right? You were just working for them.
No. I never did.
Right, but you were in their program or something. Say that again, because it just turned out that my mentor was the guy who created remote viewing, and that I trained with somebody in the program. And I know most of those guys. Mm-hmm.
So but that's all it is.
So were you already involved in your remote viewing work when you saw the craft with your daughter after the movie?
Good question. I don't know. I have to think about that. I just don't recall. I mean, I guess to some degree I was, because I was friendly with Ingo Swan starting around 2003. So to that degree, yeah, I was.
To me, it seems they have like a database, and they know all the psychic people. Because I was approached, but I never got involved like you did. It was like I was just kind of kept ignorant, and it's kind of like what you said. If you know too much, and you try to fit it into some preformed concept, then it blocks your abilities. So I realized in hindsight that I've been very involved in a lot of the programs, but they never even let me know I was in the programs, right? Just hands on me.
See, I'd like to ask you about those.
Well, that's a show. We'll do another show where you interview me.
Okay, all right, that's the deal.
We'll go into that. I mean, we can get into a little bit here, but I want to keep the focus on you because we're learning about you. But yeah, sure, you can ask a question too. That's fine. What do you think, Sash? What do you think? You're back there.
Well, listen, I'm really interested in this idea of you as a skeptic. I would probably, from my perspective, I'd say that's a subpersonality. But one of the things that I find in my work with people is I do not deal with the ontological status of their productions. So it doesn't matter how they symbol things. I think of my friend Ray Hernandez, who is upstairs, and his dog and his wife are downstairs. And the old dog, they're going to take this dog in to get killed the next day because it's too old and it's in pain. And the wife calls, Ray, come down here right now. He comes down. He says, oh my God, there's this luminescent orb. I was filled with awe and love. And the wife, who's there at the same time, says, oh my gosh, the Virgin Mary and angels. And the dog, who is crippled and in pain, jumps up like a puppy and wags his tail and lives a long time later. But here's two adult, mature people who, faced with the same stimuli, had different ways of assembling it. And so what I find, at least in my work, is if I just concern myself with the person and realize that any kind of production that they have will have resonances of inside their personality, in their life, in their past life imagery, in any place they look. And if I say make something up, the up that they make it from is also an available thing. And if I don't interfere with them and try to get information as a detective, they'll eventually expand to everything that's relevant in just the right order. That's my experience anyhow.
Ray has told me that story. I know that story. We got an echo back again.
I know. I'll mute while you're talking. Okay, hold on.
Oh yeah, that seems to help. And I think that you're right in the sense that everybody will reveal everything that is relevant in an order that makes sense to them, but ultimately it will be revealed. Oops, now everybody is blocked.
I feel understood.
Okay.
You're a great listener. Thank you.
Okay. Just ask me when you want me to come back on, because I'm going to, mute for a little bit. Why don't you two dialogue for a little bit, or if you have a question for me. But my question is.
Well, I still have my question.
The encounters. Okay, I'm going to mute for a little while. You guys dialogue. Okay.
Okay. Well, my initial question before, like Janet and I are playing a quarterback switch and running different ways, but my initial question is, what is the collective and individual wisdom that you've gotten from your extraterrestrials that you would like everybody here in Radioland to hear?
I don't know that I'm necessarily smart enough to be able to, deliver specific messages. I know, messages that have been delivered to others, and basically it's aside from the issues of environmental threats or trying to rejuvenate genetically certain species or us or the planet, philosophically the concept seems to be basically what is Hermeticism, which is it's sort of what we were talking about before about us being kind of a hologram. I mean, it's the universe is contained within the single molecule or the single cell. that God lives in the atom. It's the infinite and the most minute that are completely reflective of each other and connected and operating together. So to me, that's the most profound messaging I think that I've heard.
Yes, I get that too.
Do you?
Yes, and from the field of anthropology, I can tell you that shamanic and spiritual practitioners that really meditate and go inward always arrive at something very, very similar.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think once you get to that understanding and really appreciate it more than just an intellectual understanding, you actually can feel it and get it, then you can do stuff like, what I'm currently working on is different experiments in psychokinesis, and I'm working with some scientists on this, and in fact I'm going to be I'm leaving for Russia in a week. I'm going to go learn some Russian techniques for doing psychokinesis or telekinesis, sometimes they call it. And my sense from my own sort of self-training at this point is that it's when you arrive at a place of understanding that, you could sort of view yourself, your body, which seems to be so well defined and so clear, and and even more than that, you sort of feel your center of yourself being, in at least somewhere in your head or your face or maybe in your heart, but you don't feel the center of yourself like down by your other appendages, your feet or your whatever. Once you start to kind of see yourself as a cloud of related molecules that you don't necessarily own them. They kind of own you in a way. But that your consciousness pervades something almost in like a gas. But anyway, then you start to understand your relationship to things that are what we would call outside of our physical body that appear to be made of matter. And then you understand that using your connection with all of these atoms and molecules, that you can exchange information to them as well, and you can cause things to move or to change their molecular structure simply by connecting with them a certain way.
Yeah, that's so right on. Like Symington's experiments where little you goes inside and does things and has a dialogue with an affected tissue, and it actually changes from that focus of attention. Absolutely.
Same thing. And I do healing work as well, and that's totally the same thing. So it's all, and it's hard to imagine, if you're kind of, a intellectual type person, it's hard to imagine that your thoughts, by switching your thoughts, that you can actually have such a dramatic and very real effect on the exterior world. But you can, and it looks like magic and it looks like a miracle. But there's a way to get there. And I mean, I believe that myself, having been just sort of, trained on stuff, or the healing stuff has come to me more naturally, in the energy work. But that I do believe that we all have that capacity, and it just requires the curiosity and then a huge amount of discipline. And don't get bored and don't give up. In other words, be a bulldog personality.
Gotcha. Assert yourself appropriately.
Yeah, right. Yeah. I mean, because what you're doing is you're actually overcoming a lifetime of preconceptions about what reality is. And that's not easy. You can't do that overnight. And so, there's no reason that all of a sudden, you should immediately expect, something's got to happen now. Otherwise, I don't believe it. And it simply proves everything that I ever knew. It doesn't work that way.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you think the Russians are ahead of us in this psychic work? Because I guess they kind of started, and then we realized that they weren't perceiving it as woo-woo back in the day 40s, 50s or something. So we started playing catch-up. Did we ever catch up with them?
Well, yeah, that's an interesting discussion. Yeah, I mean, that was the whole theory, and that's why Ingo got into creating remote viewing, because that's exactly what the, what was I want to say, was it Secrets from Behind the Iron Curtain? There's something behind the Iron Curtain with Lynn's, I want to say, I forget her name. Anyway, 2 women. And they wrote it, and they everybody got kind of crazy and thought, during the Cold War, Russians are getting way ahead. It's, and yes, they have certainly, from everything I've understood, they've had hundreds of people involved on a more institutionalized basis doing these kinds of studies and work. I think there was also some thought at some point that they weren't quite as advanced as we had assumed they were, that it was based on some false news reporting. So have we caught up? I think that we've got a pretty good community going. I don't know about their community. What I understand is that they have their naysayers as much as we've got our naysayers. And so there's that tension or duality that goes on, in both countries.
Well, from my understanding, the ships, the alien ship craft, and we've been experimenting with it as well. They're run telepathically. They're run by the mind. You go on a craft and you put your hands in a certain position, and that turns the craft on, and you can move it.
Right.
Are we doing those type of experiments? Is that our next level? Because you're talking about telekinesis, using your mind to move things.
Oh, totally. Totally. But I'm just
where we're going.
Well, first of all, I don't know that you need telekinesis to do that.
Right.
I almost think it might be related more to creating a synchronicity. And how do you create a synchronicity? And that sort of takes me back to the TSP remote viewing. If you put yourself into a certain mindset with certain objectives, and certain releases of, requiring certain things to go a certain way or information to come to you a certain way, that you allow for things to occur causally within our consensus reality. That sounds a little vague, I'm sure, but
well, I actually kind of grok what you're saying.
Okay.
Because we're creating all this. This is our consensus reality. We're creating all this, and if we don't like it, on some level, we can, change it. Instead of going like in victim mentality, we can shift it to, let's proactive. Go ahead, sweetheart.
I find it useful to talk to the person's operating ego or dominant subpersonalities and say, look, you can interrupt any time it's getting too hot and you don't want the person to go there and discuss a reason that you want. You can interrupt, and the person is not going to lose you, dominant subpersonality. It's just we're going to ask you to just record and speak to your reactions. And I guess I'd also like to talk to this. Does it always have to take a long time? In my work, I find that sometimes things are people have a critical incident, some wonderful thing that happens. They have a spiritual experience, and if they have developed, if that stays in their awareness, and if they've developed a mundane and earthly as well as a spiritual part, they can then have a choice a person that can evaluate their circumstances and make choices that take the opposites within them into consideration. And one of the ways of doing that is entheogenic journeys. And I just wondered what your take is on using entheogens to have a breakthrough in a context of self-exploration.
Yikes! You got to explain to me what an entheogenic
using a psychedelic so that you are no longer bound by the matrix and the idea frame that you normally operate in.
I know that psychedelics are used a lot. I don't do well with drugs. I'm too sensitive, I guess. And things that I absolutely stay very far away from anything that would make me hallucinate. I don't tolerate it well. And I think it actually reduces my ability, my sensitivity.
What I
Thank
guess
you.
I didn't get where you were coming from, Sasha, but I kind of tracking it now. So we have all the governments are doing all these experiments with the mental capabilities, psychic abilities, and moving matter with mind and all this stuff. But part of the research involved things like the Montauk Project, and they used a lot of psychedelics. They had people on the Montauk chair, which was apparently alien technology that was open. That was ability. They were able to open stargates and send people down the time tunnel, and there was something. And a lot of the secret space program people, they report that they get drugged. They get drugged, and then it activates certain abilities when they get drugged. And we're not sure what drugs they're using, but the early movement, they were definitely using LSD or something in that genre, in that direction. So I just wonder with what you know about, some of the research and the experiments that are going on. How does all this tie in? So you're going to Russia, and I don't know what they're going to reveal to you. I'm sure they're just going to reveal to you the surface level stuff. I don't know if you're going to get some of the inside secrets, but what do you think about tying all that in together?
I remember
how this is shaping our world. Yeah.
First of all,
go ahead.
I'm old enough. I grew up with the whole drug culture thing going on, so I'm familiar with enough to know what I don't like. And I also remember Ingo telling me that there were some researchers who were trying to get him to, I don't know, take acid or whatever the drug was, I forget. And he was very unhappy with that. He did not want to. And I can only say that, that the more sensitized I get, the more I realize I have a capacity. I mean, it's what I was saying about being a creative person. If you're creative, you can kind of go anywhere and do anything, because you like exploring and you're not living by the boundaries. So if you have a drug in you that is like smashing your boundaries into little pieces so that you can't really sensitize yourself, you can't really go anyplace, you're just being kind of bombarded, it's kind of useless for this kind of, at least for me, I'm only speaking for myself, for this kind of work. And I know Ingo felt the same way too. I think other people, and I know many, for example, they love things like ayahuasca, and all this shamanic stuff or whatever, because it takes them on journeys that they couldn't possibly have imagined otherwise. And I'm just not that way.
I just wondered how it fits into
I might add, because you seem to have a really effective therapeutic use of entheogens involves first establishing that the person can recenter themselves, when they feel their spiritual self, they can also come back to a mundane self. And it's like, and then follow up. You always have a follow-up session within the next week where you find, or the next day, preferably, where you find out what came up and what needs further exploration, and how to integrate the sexual and aggressive energies that may have come up, or whatever spiritual energy that a person's used to handling, and how to witness that and integrate it. And it's just an exercise in developing an ever-expanding center or aware ego, as opposed to an operating ego, if you know what I mean.
If it works for people, it works for people. I know that apparently they, in places like Silicon Valley and whatever, they're you've got all of your top people, your executives, whatever, and they're all microdosing on LSD or whatever, because apparently it gives them that kind of boost that maybe you're talking about. I know that for me, I can't, it's like,
we're not saying, I'm not asking for you, and I think we should switch this up. We're getting a brick ball here, but I don't know how we got in this. I want to go into.
I can tell you. Listen, Nancy. I think you're extremely wise person, and I wanted to run it by you because I truly wanted to know what you had to say, and everybody's different, and I'm thank you for discussing it. I wanted to know your opinion. I value it.
Hey, listen, my opinion is, you get what you pay for here. But thank you.
Well, I want to go more into what you do, Nancy. So you were saying you're going to Russia.
Yeah.
And I don't know why. I don't know what was going on where we went down that segment. So but there have been these government programs which are related to all this remote viewing, and where they have had people experiment with psychedelics and different aspects. Some of the things we don't even know. Some of the super. But we're not going to go down there again. I want to go with what you're familiar with. So. One of the other questions I had is that you do ghost hunting. What's happened in terms of ghosts? Are ghosts in the same realm as interdimensionals? Are they inhabiting the same space, and are they different dimensions? What do you know about ghosts compared to interdimensionals and extraterrestrials?
To me, they feel different. They feel like they all have different energetic signatures. But I don't claim to know the answer to that. It does seem kind of like it would make sense that, we're dealing with sort of almost like a bleed through or an intentional crossing over of energies from different dimensions. So, it wouldn't surprise me if there's a relationship, but I don't know for sure that there is or there isn't. I can only say that they feel different to me. And does that make sense to you? Do you get the same,
yeah. I think from the reports I get, sometimes people go on board ships and they see their dead relatives. So that, since you're the psychic, then that you've done some ghost hunting and you've done, what was that show you did? Hot Leads, Cold Cases. Anyway.
Right.
So you're talking with people that are out of body sometimes. Am I getting that correct? Or are you just using psychic abilities? Tell me a little bit more about that work. I have a friend that's in New England, and he actually will talk to people that are out of body and they're dead, and they'll say, tell my son to look under the pillow in the room. I left something for him, that type of thing. Are you getting those type of things in your psychic research with the deceased?
Yeah, well, not just my research. When I do readings for people, that's what I'm doing.
Okay.
But I don't. I have many friends and colleagues who see all the time. They will see spirits with their physical eyes, I have seen spirits with my physical eyes occasionally. More often than not, I'm seeing them with my third eye, my mental screen, whatever you want to call it, and then I've been able to verify afterwards, that what I saw was in fact accurate. And yes, I deliver communications. I always, and this goes back to my sort of skeptical personality, but I'm always most skeptical of myself. And so I always really crave feedback to know whether what I've said was valuable. And I do get feedback that very often what I am telling people is extremely useful and or extremely accurate for them. But for me, it's not like an experience like I'm walking around and, bumping into, spirits of dead people and talking to them. That's, for me, it's very much I have to be focused on that as my objective, and then that information comes to me.
So before the break, you were talking about all these synchronicities. Can you give us some examples of them?
Yeah, my best synchronicity. I did a remote viewing. It was a TSP remote viewing for a client who, the targets that I use in TSP are different from traditional remote viewing. And my targets generally have to do with the client's questions. So this client had 3 questions, and basically he'd given me a brief description. He said he'd been in some type of a motor vehicle accident, that he'd fought it. His attorney had fought it, and he had won. The attorney was holding on to the settlement proceeds, refusing to turn any of the money over to him, and for 2 years had refused to return any of his phone calls. So he wanted to know, what did I think about this attorney, and how could he, the client, stop ruminating over this terrible situation, because he was getting so frustrated. Nothing he was doing was working. And so, I got a number of very accurate hits information that I was able to confirm with the client. Things like, and I break these down into different scoring categories in TSP, but more ordinary things like there was a truck involved. Yes, there was. That his attorney had reneged on his fee agreement. Yes, he did. That the client had suffered a concussion. Yes, he did. And then some more precise or more uncanny bits of information that I gave. And this is all pre-written I never talked to the client until after I've written down everything. I said the attorney had sort of this strange object, almost toy-like, on his desk, and that was confirmed. I confirmed what his attorney looked like. And then, while we're on the phone, I'm on the phone with the client, and we're talking about this, the information. A woman got on the phone, and I thought, well, maybe maybe there was, I don't know, a woman in his house who'd picked up another phone line or something, another phone, and it didn't realize he was on with me. And she said, hello. And he said, yes, hello. And she said, who is this? And he said, no, who is this? Turned out he was alone in the house. He had not called anybody. He only had one phone line. He didn't know how to conference call, didn't have that ability anyway. This woman turned out to be the paralegal from his attorney's office, and she was accusing him of having called her at that moment. And he said, no, I'm actually on the phone with somebody else. How did you call me? In other words, it was impossible.
Oh.
And they were both sort of irritated with each other, and they both get off the phone, and we continue on with the reading, and we end it. And the next morning, he gets a phone call from the attorney's office manager who says that she has just mailed him the check for the full settlement proceeds.
Interesting. Wow.
So that's what I mean by...
Did he have her in his his phone, or did she have him in her phone?
Well, I have no idea what she had in her phone. I doubt it. And he did not. He did not. He didn't have that ability. He really wasn't very tech savvy. And he didn't have her on a speed dial. I asked him, and no, he didn't.
She had a bug.
Wow. Yeah. So what do you do with that? Because you're very curious, do you ever figure out, like, how did that happen? Or do you just go, dismiss it to woo-woo? I mean, that's weird.
I mean, I was so amazed by the fact that she claimed that he had called her, and he absolutely said there was no way he could have called her and did not call her. And so I checked with him. I mean, I exchanged several emails saying, well, do you have two phone lines in your house? Do you have the ability to conference call? All kinds of stuff. I'm echoing again.
Yes, you are. I'm going to shut off the.
Right.
What if he? I guess this is a long time ago, but if he checked his phone logs, he could see if his phone initiated the call, but he didn't know her number, right?
Well, he couldn't have, because he only was he was on the phone with me and hadn't touched his phone.
Right, so he was on the only line that would go out of his. Was it a cell phone or a home line?
No, it was a landline. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a mystery. Yeah.
So stuff like that, you have to say, well, you cannot prove that there was any, causal connection by anything that we would understand as being a connection. So then what caused it? And I think where you have to go with that is you have to go with the fact that the timing of it was so perfect with the TSP remote viewing session that we were having at that exact same time. Mm-hmm. And, as I said, he'd been leaving messages for this attorney for 2 years, and the attorney had never called him back. So, they got
the message.
They got the message.
Yeah. We sent it over the other wire, the wireless.
Yeah, send it over the wireless. That one works pretty well.
Yeah. Okay, I just got a producer saying we have 5 minutes. Okay, so what do we want to focus on the last 5 minutes? What do you want our listeners to know about you and your work and things that we may have missed asking you?
No, I mean, I think the only thing that I am very, very excited about right now is this is the TSP remote viewing work, and I would really encourage anybody who is interested in finding out about it to get in touch with me. They can reach me by email at NDT, as in Nancy Tertre, at theskepticalpsychic.com. And I can
NDT
at.
I'm going to put it right here on the website.
Oh, okay, great.
NDT
at theskepticalpsychic.com.
Okay, so that'll be right on the webpage.
Yeah, and I'm literally, I am right in the middle of redoing the website, so it's it's a little bit difficult to navigate right now. But if they go onto the website, theskepticalpsychic.com, they'll see there's a workshops page, and if they go there, they'll see the basic information about it. They'll see reviews from a bunch of other students of mine. Who just, everybody who has so far taken it has really, really, really enjoyed it, and found it useful. I think sometimes people wonder, well, what am I going to do with remote viewing? And I think the answer to that is that it doesn't really matter what you do. I mean, becoming a psychic and a remote viewer made me a better lawyer. It's made me a better person. Mm-hmm. It's made me, I get clarity on things much faster than I used to, and I get accuracy. There's just a value to it. And the way that I have set this up is it's very organized, it's very systematic, and I tend to create, and any one of my students will tell you this, I create a real like a community among the students, and a really safe, secure environment for them to kind of explore any insecurities they have, and they share. And I always tell my students they're going to learn more from each other than they'll ever learn from me. And I give them that.
So how long is this course?
It's a 9-week.
Like one.
No, it's a 9-week course. It's 2 hours a week, and the 2 hours fly by. And what I do is I have an actual operational case for the students to work on towards the very end. So I get them a client, and the client will come and give feedback to every single one of the students on a particular case. And I mean, in the past, you know what? No, I didn't want to say what the operational case is, because I think it might even prejudice people what they might expect. They have been really grateful. The clients have, and what I do is I compile all of the student observations and data, and I put it together for the client so that they have something really solid to work off of.
Oh, that sounds exciting.
Yeah. Yeah, and
is
they
that
will
on Skype or Zoom, or how do you conduct the classes?
Yeah, I do it on. I probably should switch over to Zoom. I've been doing it on GoToMeeting, but yeah, it's online. So I've had students as far away as Australia. So they're all over the place in all different time zones, and I usually try to find a time that's going to work for everybody in the class.
And that's the perfect. Okay, thank you so much, Nancy. And I hope you do sign up for the class. And we're getting feedback. Aloha.
That's a wonderful teaching methodology. Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Blessings. Aloha. Thank you, listeners. Thank you. I'm Matt Patriot.
Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message.
Ladies and gentlemen, can I please have your attention? I've just been handed an urgent news story, and I need all of you to stop what you're doing and listen.
On the go? Still want to listen? Don't have one of those fancy phones with too many buttons? Don't know what an app is? Or you don't even care? Well, we got you here at Revolution Radio. Now you can dial in 24/7 to listen to our shows. We have a number for Studio A and Studio B, and best of all, it's free. Don't forget, your carrier charges for your cell phone provider may apply, though, so check with your cell provider to make sure. So ready? Here you go. Get a pen. Here's the number. Studio A is 712-432-6958, and Studio B is 716-748-0112. Thank you very much for listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, the #1 listener-supported radio station in the world.
Hey everyone, it's Barbara Jean Lindsay, the Cosmic Oracle. If you have questions about your past lives or future plans, need answers from the cosmos about your love life or career, or just want to keep your finger on the pulse of the planet, check out my show, The Cosmic Oracle, here on Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com.
Thanks for tuning in to Revolution Radio. Here at Revolution Radio, we are listener-sponsored and commercial-free. But there still are bills to pay. In order to raise some needed funds to cover the cost, our station is offering a silver special. In the continental United States for a $60 donation, or in Alaska, Hawaii, or Canada for a $70 donation, we will send you an uncirculated 2018 1-ounce pure silver Eagle. The $70 donation, the extra 10 is to cover shipping, by the way, outside of the continental United States. When making the donation, you must put Silver Eagle promo in the notes on the donation. And thank you for tuning in to Revolution Radio at revolution.radio and freedomslips.com. Without you, there is no us. Revolution Radio, where information never sleeps.
Looking for a nightcap to fill your listening needs? Come join us on Spaced Out Radio with me, Dave Scott, right here on Revolution Radio. Monday through Friday for 3 hours a night, starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern, we will take you down the supernatural path. From ET contact to the paranormal and all of the spiritual, cryptid, and conspiracy stories in between. You can find us right here on Revolution Radio, at spacedoutradio.com, on